Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to continue talking about graphs. So last time I did touch on this, but I didn't say too much about it. There are two different types of data. There's qualitative, right, which is used to describe qualities or non-numerical categories. Alright, so for example, this is things like letter grades or blood types or hair color or types of pie. Anything that isn't an actual number, that's going to be qualitative. Quantitative, on the other hand, is used to represent counts or measurements. So these are going to be the numbers. All right, so for example, test scores or heights, weights, temperatures, anything like that that you're actually getting numbers with, that is quantitative. Alright, so with that information, let's start actually looking at some graphs. So first off, we're going to look at bar graphs and pie charts. Alright, both of these are used to display qualitative data. Alright, so things with categories are best going to be represented as a bar graph and pie chart. Alright, so let's look at example 3. Draw a bar graph using the following frequency table. Alright, so it has continents and the population in billions for that continent. Alright, by the way, if anybody's wondering, this information was from 1998, so no, it's not quite up to date. Alright, so to get started, a bar graph is going to have two different axes. Alright, this is what we call the x-axis on the bottom, and going up it's what we call the y-axis. So first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to label three things. We're going to have a title. So for our title, it could just be something like population by continent. We're going to need to label the x-axis and the y-axis. The x-axis is going to be at the bottom, and that's going to be your actual categories. Alright, so down here we're going to have continents. The y-axis, that is going to be our actual numbers about it. So in this case, it's going to be our population in billions. Alright, so here's what we need to do. A bar graph just means we're going to put a bar for every single one of our categories that go up until they meet the number that they're at. Right? So on the y-axis, I'll start there. We're going to need to go up to at least 3.6. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just go up to 4. And I'm going to make this just a little bit higher. All right, so this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to make some smaller tick marks just to help us know where those halfway points are as well. On the x-axis, those are our continents. So we're going to have Asia. Next is Africa. Next is North America. Oops. Then Latin America. Then Europe. And lastly, Oceania. All right, so for each of these continents, we're just going to make a bar go up and touch wherever it is that the number goes up to. All right, so here's what I mean by that. For Asia, we want it at 3.6, right? So it's going to be just over 3.5. So our bar goes up just over 3.5, and there we go. All right, there's our Asia bar. Okay. For Africa, we're going to do the same thing. So for Africa, it goes up to 0.8, which is going to be just below 1. And there we go. Now, just one kind of note about these. All the bars should be the same width and not touch. Okay. So, next up, North America. 0.3 would be just under half, so it's going to be a small little one down there. Latin America is at 0.5. So just bring it up about to 0.5. Europe is 0.7, so it's going to be not quite up to 1, but bigger than a half. And then Oceania is 0.03, which is extremely small down here. You can barely even see that there's a bar on there. And that's it. That's the basics of a bar graph. All right, so you just make sure you have your title. You label your axis. And then you just bring the bars up from every category to meet the number that it needs to meet. All right, so next up, let's look at example 4. Draw a pie chart using the following frequency table for grades on an essay. All right, so we're given the frequency table, and for the pie chart, the most important thing is going to be this relative frequency, because a pie chart, you just fill it a certain percentage. All right? So first off, I'm going to go ahead and just make a dot in about the center of our circle, just so we have that for reference. And we're going to start cutting this graph up. All right. So I'm going to take the biggest percentage first, just because it's the easiest to work with. All right, so 50% here for C means we just cut it straight in half. All right, this is C, this is 50%. Nice and easy. Next up, we have A. A is 25%. That's a quarter of the circle. So again, another easy one. Just cut it into a fourth. This is A up here. This is 25%. All right, next up we have B, just 15%. Now cutting this last piece into 10% and 15%, you don't need to get out a protractor and start measuring angles or anything like that. Technically, you could get very precise with the degrees and everything like that. But for our purposes, all you really need to do is notice that 15 is bigger than the 10. So we're going to cut out a slightly bigger portion of it. We're going to call that B. We're going to call that 15%. And lastly, we have D with 10%. All right. Now, one more thing for a pie chart is we do need to make a little key, or a legend. And this is just to say what different colors you're using, all right? Because I didn't have to actually label these A, B, C, and D. I could have, instead of putting C right here, just filled this whole thing blue. But if I did that, now how do you know what that blue actually means? That's where your legend comes in, right? So for each of these, I'm just going to put the color and then say what it represents. So green is A, red is B, blue is C, and yellow is D. All right. That lets us not have to label it in the pie chart itself, just labeled off to the side. All right, next up, histograms and line charts. So histograms and line charts are commonly used to display quantitative data. All right. So these are ones you can use for actual numbers. So this first one, this is a histogram. So the histogram is very similar to the bar graph with a couple differences. First off, and it's not shown on this one because we want to make this first example really clear and to see what it is, but the bars will normally touch. All right. And this, instead of being done by a normal frequency table, this comes from a bend frequency table. All right, so you can clearly see that this first bar is the scores from 400 to 800. The second bar is the scores from 800 to 1200, and so on. Each of these is an entire bin of scores that's being counted. Right? Next up, the line chart is pretty similar to some of the other ones, just x-axis, y-axis, and for any point on this x-axis, it has a corresponding y value. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is if you take a look at, for example, 40,000 miles at the bottom, then if you want to know the car's value, all you have to do is look up, find where it is on the line, and then look over, and that tells you the car's value. So at 40,000 miles, for example, that means your car would be worth $8,000, right, according to this one line chart. So this is really good to show data that just changes with the number of miles or changes over time, where every certain mile has a specific value. And this is just a way to put all those pairs on a graph, make a nice line through it, and you're good to go. All right, now I'm not going to show you how to do these by hand. However, in the next video, we're going to switch over and we're going to be on Excel. All right, so before you watch the next video, make sure you have Excel, make sure you have it opened up. You can follow along with me, and we're going to go through how to make all of these different graphs and charts through Excel. All right. So I will see you in that video.